In the beginning, there were guns. So this right here is another video that I am making based off of, well, my entire arsenal. I'm doing a little series where I go through every single gun in my arsenal and I talk about the history and development and etc, why they exist. And I'm doing this in an effort to earn myself up to 100,000 subscribers. So if this earned your subscription, great. If not, then I'll have to try again on the next video because I'm looking to do this every single day. So I have here a cap and ball, or cap and ball muzzle loader. This right here is a Frontier rifle, but it's based obviously off of a Hawkins rifle. And, well, rather than talk about this particular rifle and this manufacturer and whatnot, we're just going to go ahead and talk about black powder rifles in general. So this right here is a percussion cap fired muzzle loader, but we're going to go ahead and start off talking about flintlocks. I don't have a flintlock, otherwise I would go ahead and use that flintlock to represent flintlocks here, but since I don't have it, I can't really use that. So at the very beginning, whenever black powder firearms were starting to become a thing, matchlocks were, well, essentially exactly like this right here, except you had a little port at the back of the barrel where you stuck in a match or a match or some sort of flaming material to actually ignite the powder to send your ball downrange. Now, flintlocks are the updated version of that. Definitely a far better design, a far better, what's the word I'm looking for? Option. That's the word I'm looking for. Flintlocks were a far better option in comparison to the matchlock, because matchlock you need to carry some sort of burning thing around with you in order to ignite the powder, whereas the flintlock just made spark because you had a flint striking across steel, and that spark ignited the powder inside of the frizzen that was on the rifle. However, that was still not an ideal circumstance. Definitely more ideal than the matchlock, but definitely not ideal in comparison to something like this. This right here is a percussion cap fired muzzle loader, and what that means is that this right here, instead of having a flintlock mechanism where you have a flint to provide the spark, this actually takes a percussion cap which acts as a blasting cap that sends a fire and spark and concussive blast into the chamber, igniting the gunpowder that is inside of the chamber of the muzzle loader, setting off that gunpowder and sending whatever projectile it is that you have going downrange. This design came about in about the 1850s, just in time to see heavy use in the American Civil War. Prior to that, flintlocks were definitely more of the mainstream. However, a lot of flintlocks were converted to this percussion cap system. Flintlocks, they were very susceptible, whatever that word is that I'm trying to look for there. They were very vulnerable to water and humidity and moisture and whatnot. There was a way to close up the system for the flintlock, but it wasn't exactly waterproof and you still had some issues with that system. However, a nice, small, compact percussion cap was definitely a far more suited option for being able to keep out water, mud, dirt, debris, the elements that you are going to see on the frontier or the battlefield, depending on what context you were using the rifle in. But not only that, whenever you have a flintlock, you have to prime your pan, meaning you have to get out your priming powder, pour your priming powder into your pan every time you want to fire, as opposed to a percussion cap, which you literally just take the percussion cap and throw it onto this nipple, and then you can pull a trigger and send a round downrange. Now, I know that I said before I was going to fire all of my guns on these videos, but I actually don't have any black powder. So we will not be able to fire this one, but I'll still show you guys how it works. Now, obviously, percussion cap goes right there. I've already talked about that. But what you do for a muzzle loading rifle is here at the muzzle loading end, you would pour an X amount of powder down your barrel. Normally for this right here, this is a 50 caliber rifle. I would do, for range plinking, probably about 50, maybe 60 grains of powder. But if I'm out hunting or something, I do something more like 70 to 90, depending on my projectile and what it is that I'm actually hunting after. But you pour your powder down your barrel. This would all be done before priming it because you don't want to accidentally set it off. And then you would stick in some sort of wad or spacer, some sort of fabric. You don't necessarily need that, but you it's definitely a good idea. Some sort of wad or fabric to separate the projectile from the powder, and then you would shove your projectile into your barrel. This particular one is rifled. They were not all rifled, but this one is. But you would shove your projectile down your barrel until it seats firmly inside of your black powder. You definitely want to make sure that you have a nice compact fit. Otherwise, you would risk overpressure because black powder is an explosive and not necessarily a propellant. You would use this little ramrod that sits on the bottom of the rifle to ram your cartridge home. In this particular case, this gun is empty, and that's why the ramrod goes all the way in like that. But this right here ensures that you have yourself a nice tight fit with your projectile properly seated on top of your gunpowder. And then you have your percussion cap here. Whenever you pull the trigger, the hammer falls, and that sets off that black powder because the percussion cap goes bang and the black powder goes bang, and that pushes your projectile out of the barrel. If you have rifling, that causes your projectile to spin, which gives it increased accuracy. One of the huge benefits of a firearm like this is that unlike cartridge firing guns, you can shove a variety of different kinds of ammunition into something like this, which is one of the reasons why I say having yourself a muzzle loading firearm is one of the best ways to get around any kind of ammunition crisis, because although it would not be good for the rifling, you can literally shove anything into this rifle and fire it. Of course, you can shove properly sized lead balls into this thing, which is mostly what I shoot, lead ball ammunition, but you can fire conical bullets, you can fire any number of properly sized bullets onto this thing to achieve some really, really good accuracy. Of course, on top of that, you don't necessarily have to fire just bullets. I have loaded these with BBs before. I've loaded them with bits of debris and nails and brass shavings and all sorts of stuff to be able to fire this out of this rifle. And like I said, that's not necessarily good for the rifling, especially if you are using something like a steel BB or something like that. If you're going to do something like that, I recommend using a softer material than the barrel so you mitigate the damage done to that rifling. But for that, you just pour your powder in, put in some sort of wad or separator to separate that powder, and then you put in your loose items. Like for this case, we're just going to call it like lead BBs, right? Loose items that are smaller than the diameter of the actual bore itself. Now, to get those to stay in place, you get yourself another wad or another piece of fabric or another some kind of something, and you shove that in front of that loose packaged, the loose packaged shot, whatever it is that you have. And whenever you do that, with that all nice and compacted down here, whenever you fire, it's just going to send that shot flying out the front of the barrel like it would any other projectile. It's definitely a very, very good option if you want to be able to run as many different kinds of ammunition as possible, including different ways to make your own. Black powder is incredibly simple and easy to make, which I say ironically because I do not have any. But that being said, this right here is basically what you would expect from one of these rifles. Now, the United States started off with muzzle loaders. They existed basically in the entirety of the United States history. Back during the American Revolution, we relied on French-made Charlevilles along with a good number of other styles of musket. I believe that those were smoothbore. Can't remember the caliber, 76, I think, maybe 69. But they were large caliber smoothbore muskets, I think smoothbore, the Charleville ones, but they were flintlock. And fast forward, almost a century or so, that is whenever we moved on to this percussion capping. A lot of those old school flintlocks were converted to this percussion cap system simply because it was a dramatically superior system in comparison to something like a flintlock. However, that being said, on the frontier lifestyle, personally, I would prefer a flintlock over this right here because you only have so many percussion caps, but you can consistently find a way to use a flint and a steel to make spark to be able to ignite your system and send lead downrange. So that right there, the more rudimentary design would definitely be ideal, in my opinion, if you are going to find yourself on the front and have no sort of resupply. There are ways to ignite this system without the percussion cap, but they are less than ideal. And of course, this right here is just the traditional style of muzzle loader. We have some sort of trigger mechanism, some sort of hammer falling striking system that ignites the gunpowder in some sort of way. But there's also a bunch of other kinds of muzzle loaders out there that are not designed like this. Like, for example, the puckle gun that sent a bunch of rounds downrange in like a Roman candle style of firing, almost like what we would consider to be a machine gun today, but that was a black powder muzzle loading rifle that existed back then. There were also ones that had like rotating barrels or double barrels to where you could have multiple shots before having to reload. There were a good number of different kinds of systems, but a single barrel like this was definitely more common, simply because it was the most cost-effective, the cheapest to produce, the easiest to produce. That right there is probably one of the main reasons why these right here were so popular in comparison to some other designs that were out there. Now, black powder is always going to be corrosive, so you always want to make sure that you clean your rifle after firing it. So bear that in mind if you're going to take it out. These particular ones, just this design is not really designed to be all that strong. That's why you can't fire smokeless powder out of things like this. And just bear that in mind, that is a safety issue if you decide to get one of these and you can't find black powder like myself. So hopefully you guys had fun with this video. I know I did. I would like to get myself some black powder. Maybe I'll make a part 2 to this, and I'll send some lead down range. So that being said, I'm going to say thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see y'all on the next episode. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. Shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.